Okay, how's everyone doing? Welcome back to another video. Today, this is very similar to the last video. We're getting into the book of Ecclesiastes and just looking at one verse, specifically chapter 3, verse 11. So if you want more information about this book as a whole, there's a couple videos that I've made about Ecclesiastes, so you can check those out here that kind of give like an overview of the book. And yeah, if you're not subscribed, I post videos like this every single week. So if that's something that interests you, hit the subscribe button. But yeah, let's get started. First things first, context. You always got to have context, always important. So in Ecclesiastes 3, this passage that we're looking at today, right before this, we have what some people call the time poem. Now, specifically, this is verses 2 through 8 of chapter 3 here. And basically, we have these parallels. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. And so on and so forth. A lot of repetition. It's very cyclical. And that's the point, that we're talking about time. That's what the teacher who's speaking in Ecclesiastes here, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about time, the way it cycles. People die, people are born, people weep, and then they laugh, and on it goes. And that's life, that's time. We could flip back to chapter 1, where the teacher says, a generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and then it goes around to the north, and so on and so forth. So that's verses 2 through 8. And then verses 9 through 15, part of what we're looking at here, is a new section, but still very much connected and related to the ideas presented in the poem. And it's all, again, coming down to this idea of time. And so it's building off the ideas in the poem, explaining them, applying them, and that's this passage. So let's get into verse 11 now, the verse that we're looking at. But I'm actually going to read from verse 9. What gain has the worker from his toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So we see that the teacher is obviously still talking about time. Again, we're out of the poem, but we haven't left behind this idea. And he's expanding on the point that he's trying to make about time, specifically the way that we as humans are caught up in the cyclical nature of time. There's an interesting phrase that the teacher uses in verse 11. He says that God has put eternity into man's heart. So this first word that the ESV translates eternity is the Hebrew word olam. Now, eternity is not a bad translation, but this word is less about like eternity or eternal things, especially in the way that we would think about it, especially coming from like a New Testament perspective. Rather, this word is really more about the grand scope of time. It could be, the ancient past or the distant future, especially within the context of Ecclesiastes 3. It would make sense that the teacher is talking about the totality of time in all its repetitiveness, in all its cyclical nature. So what does it mean that God has put this in our hearts? First things first, when we're talking about the heart, we need to remember that the way that the Jews, the Hebrew writers, thought about the heart, the lave, that's the Hebrew word, it is different than the way that we think about the heart. We think of heart in terms of desire, emotion, love. The Hebrew word, though, actually refers more to your understanding self. That's kind of the way I've heard it explained. It's a combination of both reason and emotion. And it's more similar in a lot of ways to the way that we think about the mind, the rational part of us. And so there is this combination, though, when we're talking about the lave, of both reason and emotion. Those are the words. So that's what we kind of have to keep in mind when we're talking about the Hebrew idea of the heart. So God has put olam, this sense of the grand scope of time, into our lave, our understanding self. We're aware of time as this huge perpetual thing. We're able to understand that this is a reality. We see this, and we know this to be true, that time just cycles, that seasons come and seasons go, and ultimately we're just a grain of sand in the grand scheme of things and the grand scheme of time. On the one hand, this is frustrating. God has given us this understanding of the vastness of time, and yet we're limited by our humanity. We can't fully comprehend the works of God. On the other hand, though, this idea is reassuring, and that brings me to my next point. There's a certain reassurance that comes when we accept that we are living in God's creation and that we are God's creation. Throughout this passage and throughout the Bible, we see this Hebrew word natan. This word means to give or put or set, and we see in this passage that God has given us a task. We see that God has put olam into our heart. There's reassurance that comes in remembering that, as frustrating as it might be that we're aware of the complexity and grandiosity of time and yet limited by our humanity, we can remember that God is God, and He's a good God. And ultimately, He has made everything beautiful in its time. And we can trust everything that God has instituted. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, let me know if you want me to keep making videos like this and if you have some passages that you want me to look at in future videos. But yeah, like the video, drop a comment, all those things, and I will see you guys next week.